Good morning, everybody. So he said I could talk as long as I wanted to, so I just want to say thank you for your time.
I knew that was coming.
I'm just kidding. So, it's a little intimidating standing up here on the stage because there's so many familiar faces in this auditorium, and some of them are my former bosses. And so I'm just going to say up front, if I screw this up really, really bad, they didn't train me very well. So you can bring Mr. Jeff Lang out, Mr. Danny Featherston, and there's probably some others sitting out here. So, but I'm very, very thankful to have this opportunity to come and talk to you about the PAEs today. I know there's a lot of questions swirling around the industry about what's going on from an acquisition perspective, et cetera. I will try my best to answer those questions, but I'll also tell you there's still a lot of unknowns associated with the PAEs, how we're going to operate, how we're going to execute, et cetera. But I can tell you the one thing that we're not going to do, and that's not let our mission fail while we go through this term. So at the bottom line for everybody here today, mission is number one. We'll figure out the processes and how we make it work as we go through this, but we're not going to let our soldiers down. Period. Bottom line. That's my bottom line message for everybody today. One thing I wanted to start off with on behalf of General Lozano, because we have so many industry partners in the audience today, is just thank you. We cannot do our mission without our industry partners. We know that there's a lot of new entrants into this area, and we look forward to learning about the capabilities, because it takes all of us to do what I just said about continuing to support soldiers. And that is first and foremost, not only in General Lozano's mind, but the PAE structure as a whole across the organization, ASALT, all the way up to the Secretary of War. And it's very, very important for us to all stay centered on that message. I know we're all out here to make bottom line dollars for our companies and stuff, but if you ever lose focus on those soldiers, shame on you. Because that's what we're all here to do, is make sure we're supporting those guys and ladies that are fighting for us every single day. All right, so I do have some slides. I figured this was the best way to kind of center the conversation. But as Mr. Fitzgerald said, please feel free to ask me questions. If I tell you I don't know, I probably don't know. I can give you my opinion, and I will caveat it with it is my opinion, because we are still storming. I'm not even gonna say norming, because we're not anywhere close to norming right now. So if we go to the next slide, please. And I keyed in on a word on Dr. Fitzgerald's chart called tremors, because there's a lot of tremors out there right now. And I could probably have industry stand up and tell me more of what's going on from a PAE structure than I know myself, because y'all seem to be the first to know, and we learn a lot through industry. So if there's any tremors y'all are hearing, I would greatly appreciate y'all bringing those to our attention so we can ensure that we're either addressing them or we're doing what y'all tell us we're supposed to be doing, maybe. So, all right, next slide, please. All right, so I think I'm going to take this mic off. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So, I know a lot of y'all have seen this chart. Y'all have seen the Secretary of War roll out the acquisition reform. You have seen many senior leaders talk through what's going on from an acquisition reform perspective. But one thing I wanted to really highlight is that the acquisition process is not broken per se. Just like all of us from a company perspective, we all need to be focused on continuous improvement. And that's what this whole initiative is about, is how do we take what we have and continue to make it better. I will tell you as a person and as an individual, I go to work every single day figuring out how I can become better. And that's what we need to be doing from an organizational perspective, is figuring out how we can get better, how we can get faster, how we can get things out to those soldiers quicker, capability-wise, because the threat is changing quicker than we can evolve. And that is what's driving some of these initiatives that we're trying to put in place as an organization overall. So as you see up top, why the reform? We just need to get better. And I just ask you to think about that from an organizational perspective, from a company perspective. How can you get better to help us make the industry better, to make the PAEs better, to make what we're providing to the soldiers better, faster, quicker, without inducing too much risk that's unacceptable? What's changing? We're going through a lot of norming. We're not norming. We're going through a lot of storming right now on what's changing. Because there's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of words. People think they know what they mean. We think we know what they mean, but we adjust fire quite rapidly within PAE fires, because we really feel like we're on fire pretty much every single day with all the requirements we're trying to execute. Why now? Again, the threat's not getting any, it's there, it's changing. rapidly. Ukraine has been a tremendous example for us on how we need to rapidly evolve, what risks we are willing to take to counter the threats that are coming at us, so that not only do we protect the United States, but we also protect our partners and our foreign allies across the globe. So that's why we're changing. It's all about getting better. All right, I want to pause kind of after each chart just to see if anybody has any questions or tremors they would like to tell me. But if not, I will continue just to kind of roll, and then we can have a conversation at the end. I'm not a big briefer of charts per se. I'm more of a conversationalist, so I really do like conversation as we go through this. So any questions on why we're changing or anything anybody needs a clarification on? All right, nothing heard. Let's go to the next slide. I probably should have got a lapel mic because I move around way too much. So, all right, here's all the areas from an acquisition perspective, contracting perspective, et cetera, that we're talking about. And this is probably where most of the questions will key in on as we walk through this. So from an acquisition perspective, and I'm going to refer to my charts in front of me, acquisition as a whole has changed considerably over the past couple of years when we moved away from the standard acquisition process into the middle tier acquisition pathways associated with rapid prototyping, rapid fielding, urgent capabilities, et cetera. And we have been able to make incredible strides in those areas, but there are still opportunities for improvement for us to get capabilities out to the field as quickly as we possibly can. I know one of the big questions that keeps being asked is what authorities are the PAEs going to have? And that is one area that we're still working through because we still have to maintain those checks and balances. We cannot, as fabulous as General Lozano is and as dedicated as he is to his mission set, we need the collective skill sets for our enablers like our test community, like our contracts community, to ensure that we're doing the right things across the board and we're legally doing what we should be to make sure we're getting the capabilities to bear that we need to get. And y'all come into play in that, right? I mean, we don't want to just be running wild to try to get things done just because we think we have the authority to run wild. That doesn't do anybody any good because we will eventually deliver hardware that could hurt somebody or capability that could hurt somebody. And I will tell you, that's probably one of the things when I worked in the prototype integration facility with Dane, is I worked on aviation platforms. And anytime I heard about a Black Hawk helicopter going down, the first thing I asked myself is, did we touch that tail number? That would have been a bad day for me if I touched that tail number and something had happened on that aircraft that we may have had something to do with. So it really gets personal for a lot of us here as we execute our mission and stuff, because ultimately, if we're going to deliver capability, number one, we need to make sure the soldier gets what he or she deserves that's going to help them do their mission. But number two, we also continue to make sure that it's safe for them to do their mission, because I want them to come home to their family. I want to ensure that I'm not delivering something that could harm somebody because I want to go too fast. That's not the intent of this. The intent is to give capability in increments so that we can ensure we're providing the capability we need. Contracting oversight. So you'll see some of these enablers as I go through the chart, but we will have a dedicated senior contracting officer dedicated to PAE fires. And what that entails is it's really no different than how PEO Missiles and Space operated back in the day, because Mr. Joe Genta, who is the SCO for ACC, we could pick up the phone and call him at any moment and he would react if something urgent came up. So from a PAE perspective, we don't see this operating very differently. There may be some authorities powered down from a dollar threshold level that Mr. Genta will have more authority at a higher dollar threshold, but outside of that, we had a very good relationship with our ACC community previously. Now, where industry could come involved in that, you've been hearing a lot about these frameworks, these deals that the DepSec War is making, etc. So we're looking at very unique contracting strategies, very unique profit structures, very unique industry increasing capacity and things of that nature. So the MAC Munitions Acceleration Council is one of those areas that's really focused on our munitions and in our commodity base. The MSE, PAC-3 MSE, as well as our new PRISM missile are involved in those discussions. So DepSec War really wants to re-energize the industrial base. He wants to make sure that we're delivering and have the stockpiles we need from a U.S. perspective as well as an FMS perspective to protect ourselves and protect our foreign allies, etc. So just know from a contracting perspective, there's some of those things going on. You can go read about all these frameworks. I think there was a recent article published for L3 Harris of where they're spinning off a company that the DepSec War, from a rocket motor perspective, made some deals. And so we're taking advantage of all those opportunities. We're also continuing to look at those unique contracting strategies. We are publishing so many RFIs right now associated with some of the new entrants that we have coming on board that I encourage you, make sure you're reading SAM.gov. We have an industry day going on right now, as a matter of fact, for our CAMO program, which is our Common Autonomous Multi-Mission Launcher. It's gonna be a base platform that can shoot different variants of missiles, right? So we also have an industry day coming up for our mobile tactical cannon. That's one of our new commodities we have within the PAE portfolio. So there is so many opportunities going on. We're not going to lock ourselves into single vendors anymore because, as I said, that threat is continuing to evolve. So we're looking for those next greatest technologies that we can rope into the equation. So modularity, commerciality, quick change, big focus areas for us right now, so that we're always looking for ways to improve against those evolving threats. Requirements oversight. So again, previously the Army Futures Command out in Austin, Texas was the primary requirements driver for all things PAE, PEO back in the day, RIGTO, etc. And again, we had a great relationship with our cross-functional team managers. General Pat Costello, who was the CFT lead back when I worked at PO Missiles and Space as the deputy, he is now deputy PAE from a requirements perspective for us. So we already had that natural synergy from a requirements perspective. The one thing I really want to highlight from a requirements perspective is people always say, well, General Lozano can trade off requirements. General Lozano can trade off this requirement. It's not about trading requirements. It's about understanding the requirement and how you can deliver interim capability and make sure we're categorizing the risk so that we can get something out to the field quicker. We don't have to have a, oh my gosh, it's the perfect product in the field. But if we can provide some initial capability and understand the initial capability for the user who's using it, I'll just use an example. It needs to go 50 kilometers. Well, right now it only goes 30. Is that good enough? Absolutely, send it to me, I'll take it. That's the requirement trade-off we're talking about. The words previously were min viable product, which caused a lot of churn because the test community was concerned about how we would test it. The requirements community was concerned about it didn't do everything it was supposed to be. But those are the type of trades we're talking about, is really not accepting the full product, but really accepting that we can incrementally deliver something from a capability perspective. And General Lozano and General Costello, along with the rest of the PA community, are going to make those recommendations for incremental deliveries as opposed to full up capability. G8 programming. So it's very funny. After this meeting, we're having an offsite on G8 programming, and so the G8 side of the fence is a little bit different. This is probably an unknown area of how we're going to change from a PAE perspective and how much authority General Lozano will have to trade off money between programs, right? Because again, it's about checks and balances. And he doesn't have to go ask Mother May I per se, but it's a conversation with all of the stakeholders because we are still very much reliant on our stakeholders as we execute across the board. ATEC support. I would tell you, General Gayton at ATEC has been a tremendous partner to date, and he has structured his new organization to really support what the PAEs want to do. We have a dedicated person identified for us, and you'll see it on the chart in a few moments, that if we have a test issue or if we have a test that didn't go as well as we needed it to go, or we want to take advantage of modeling and simulation or things like that, that's where those dedicated test resources within the PAE fires is going to buy some bang for our buck. Testing is hard. Testing takes time. Reports take time. And so those are some of the things we're trying to look at to streamline as part of this process. System Center. I grew up in ADMIC my entire career before I moved over to PEO Missiles and Space. So I have so many connections back to Advent, and there's so many of you in the audience today. It was so great seeing some of you that I hadn't seen in a minute. But Dr. Kirsch is going to be our primary system center lead, and this is really more focused on ensuring from an S&T, science and technology perspective, we're identifying early where the science and technology focus needs to be so that we can make sure it gets over that valley of death into a program of record so that we can deliver that capability to the field. So we're going to have more insight from a PAE perspective and more influence is probably not the right word, but I'll use it, influence into that requirements community at the S&T level so that we're focused on the right things. Because right now we're focused on a lot of things and we really need to be focused on the right things. So understanding where those gaps may be and how we would fill those gaps would allow us to take our limited resources from a funding perspective we have and identify what we need to do from an S&T to make sure it transitions into a product and a program of record. And then sustainment and logistics. So we get all of our sustainment and logistics support from AMCOM. So they are embedded within our PM shops. We're going to continue to work with our AMCOM logistics partners. There will be some areas where General Lozano will have more again, authority than he previously had. He will have the hardware material release and software material release authority under his purview. But he will always rely on his AMCOM partners because they're the SMEs in some of the areas like safety, like some of the log functions, all the hazards associated with releasing hardware and software, making sure that we don't do something unsafe before we put capability into the field. So I know I said a lot there. This is kind of a chart I figured would draw more questions than any, just because people are very interested on what those authorities are going to be and how we're going to execute. So I'll pause to see if anybody has any questions. And if I know you and you ask me a hard question, I got a good memory. Sorry, go ahead.
So I have a question regarding number 6, System Center and Lab Support. You mentioned Mr. Kurtz. I'm curious what SMDC's role will be in supporting SMD.
Yeah, so absolutely. So as a matter of fact, we just met with SMDC this week because SMDC is very valued partners for us from a directed energy perspective, and they carry the load for us from an S&T on the DE side. So we wanted to get our hands around what DE S&T programs they had going on so that then we can help shape, just like we will in the AVNIC lab, to make sure we're putting those resources in the right place. So Dr. Kirsch is making sure he is tagged in with SMDC because as the lead for us across centers, he's going to help us keep the pulse on both sides of the fence. And we'll continue to work with Dr. Crapples and Tim Bishop and their team just to make sure we're all focused where we need to be from a directed energy perspective. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned SMDC. My apologies. Mr. Lane.
Hey, thanks for being here. Hey, a question on, so with the NDA 26 now in blog, thousands and thousands of pages of laws are now gone.
Mm-hmm.
So are you seeing any change of things that you don't have to do on the contracting officer side of the equation or the legal side of the equation? And if not, is there anybody encouraging, in this case, Mr. Genta, hey, what are 10 things we no longer have to do that you used to have to do now that we have the new NDA in place? Thanks.
Absolutely. So, yes, we are seeing some changes, and it goes back to the thresholds that the SCOs and the COCOs, the contracting officers who sit in our PM shops, have, because those thresholds have been raised. If you ask them off the top of my head, I'm going to lie to you, so I'm not going to try to throw numbers. So, that's a process change where everything doesn't have to go up to 40 echelons above where it used to have to go. So that allows us to power some things down. So we are seeing those changes. Mr. Genta has flowed that out to us on how he plans to execute what thresholds each of his layers, I'm going to say it that way, can execute. And that's going to help us streamline considerably. So very few things are going to have to go up to the ACC scope. And the less layers you have, the better, right? Because the more hands that touch it, I like to say, if you're going to review something, you're always going to have a comment on it because you're going to show your value add, because you want to make a comment, whether it's a good comment or not. I'm guilty, I'm guilty. But we're seeing those. We're also seeing some opportunities for Tina Light, where we don't have to go out and utilize some of the, and that's really a place, everybody familiar with the Tina thresholds and everything. So that's one of the places that's really going to help these small businesses come into play. Because a lot of these small businesses, they don't have those certified accounting systems. And we don't want them to not be able to participate in a government activity because they don't have certified government contracting systems. Their business can't afford to have that. They would suck up all their profits, all their opportunity for competing, probably trying to get that into place. I'm not knocking it. It's a good thing. I'm not knocking it. But we're also seeing some TINA-like activities that we are working through as well. Probably another area that I'm seeing a lot is in the new entrance area. We're moving fast, and there is a lot of new entrants across the board that are bringing product to bear, developing it on their own, and we're taking advantage of some of the capabilities. So, if I've built this piece of paper already and this piece of paper meets my requirement, then I'm gonna make sure that I take advantage of that piece of paper. That don't mean I'll take advantage of it the next iteration, because I may need 2 sheets of paper, and somebody else has already developed 2 sheets of paper. So, new entrants is another area from a contracting perspective that I'm seeing a lot of changes on how we roll them into equations. So those are probably the top 3, Mr. Layout, that I'm seeing, so hopefully that answers your question.
Ask a follow-up?
Yes.
So then do you anticipate, y'all using commercial solution openings more, or, thank you.
Yes, sir. So that's why I mentioned at the beginning, or I think I mentioned at the beginning, modularity, commerciality. I'll use our industry day that's coming up for our new mobile tactical cannon. We have John Deere and we have Caterpillar and we have some of those entrants that are very interested in bringing capability to bear because they have base platforms, right? They have big dump trucks that can carry heavy loads and things of that nature. So commerciality is a big push as well. We don't need to reinvent the wheel when somebody already has something that exists. It just does not buy us the time, the speed that we're trying to move with. So as an industry, I encourage you to look for those people who are out there who have some capability that you can partner with and team with to make sure we're getting products to bear as fast as we possibly can, while minimizing the risk that it don't meet the requirement. Danny, I said, hold on. Danny.
Yeah, reference number 4 up there. So, can you share what's going on with appropriations, color of money, that sort of thing? 'Cause we're really.
Your guess is as good as mine. I'm still waiting on an appropriation. I'm hoping for a non-furlough at the end of this month because my people are extremely busy and we got a lot of things we're trying to do. We're doing everything we can, and I'm okay about this, Miranda's opinion, right? So we have a lot of programs that are new start programs that we can't start until we get an appropriation. So we're doing everything we can on our existing commodity base to ensure that I'm just gonna use the word, keeps the light on, because we cannot afford for the light to go off because we still have commodities and products downrange in the field that need our support. So I don't have a good answer to that question, unfortunately, so. Go ahead.
One add-on, so basically the colors of money can kind of limit what you can do. I heard, actually spoke with Congressman Adderall about that.
Yeah, I'm seeing no changes in the color of money. We have heard the terms flexible funding, but we've also heard that we may not get the ability to have flexible funding, so all of that is still up in the air. But Miranda's not tracking any changes right now to the colors of money and the flexibility. Our only flexibility right now is still our FMS money because it has colorless, but I am not tracking any changes. But I can take a do out and follow back up if I hear anything. Again, that's a troomer, so I learned something I probably need to follow up on. Thank you, Danny. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Will internal testing be accepted if someone unveils a new product or an improvement? Because as you know, in the past, government testing was always seen as the bona fides, and people would come in with internal testing and they often have a higher risk. What's the status on that?
Yeah, and I'm gonna speak from a municipal perspective because aviation world is a little bit different, and each commodity is probably a little bit different because there's safety parameters that are different across the commodities. So from a municipal perspective, we're gonna take a look at whatever test data is available, and that's where that test enabler within the PAE is gonna allow us to say, you can use this to satisfy 75% of requirement, but we need to go do this delta testing as opposed to doing a full up test, right? So that's the goal, is we work through this, is to take advantage of the test that has been done, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel from an industry perspective. Now, is that gonna take change? Is that gonna take mindset change? Because we still have DOT and the oversight on several of our programs. So this is not just a change in process, it's also a change in mindset. So we have to ensure that we get all the right stakeholders in the room, all the right stakeholders understand the risk, all the right stakeholders are good with the data we've been provided, and this is the delta we need to do to build an interim capability, a full capability, etc. And modeling and sim is another big area we're talking about, right? Because tests are expensive, and I think it's very, very important for us to take more advantage of modeling and sim data so that we don't have to do things in the field where we have to go shoot a multi-million-dollar target 14 times to prove the capability. But again, we have to ensure that those models and sims are accredited, people have confidence in them, and that they are replicating what we could experience in the field. And that's a little difficult when you're developing new products and stuff because you just don't have the data to anchor those models. So that's one of those risk trade-off areas we're gonna have to evaluate from a test perspective.
Thank you.
Hold on a sec, Jesse.
On the material release, who's a good proponent for that under the new PAE construct to bring together the technical side and the logistics and safety side?
So all of that'll it'll come to General Lozano, but we're still working out how that's gonna work from a process perspective. I anticipate if it's an integrated, again, this is Miranda's opinion, this is not codified in stone yet. I anticipate if it's an integrated type activity that our integrated fires directorate or CPE integrated fires, and since I am CPE integrated fires, I should know, right? But I anticipate it would come through that forum, and then it would go to General Lozano from a recommendation perspective. If it's a standalone product, it would come through the PM, and then the PM would bring it through the CPE to General Lozano as a recommendation on how, or if that is truly ready for material release. That answer your question?
Well, I was also thinking about, like, right now, AMCOM is holding the authority for material release. So as it shifts to the PAE, are you still gonna be dependent on your AMCOM as an enabler to help with that?
Yes. Yeah, we will still be dependent on them because they still house the safety people, they still have some of that. So Ms. Lisa Alexander's our enabler for sustainment, and so we're gonna rely on them. Now, if we experience bottlenecks or something, we'll break those with General Robinson and the team. But we have had a couple of successes already from a material release perspective, especially on the software side, of where that process has worked really, really well with General Lozano having that authority. Yeah. Sir, I have a question.
Good morning, thanks for coming today. Quick question, do you happen to know if the PAE, specifically PAE fires, are gonna have their own small business offices associated with them?
So right now, we won't have our own small business office. Unfortunately, we partner with our, all our teammates across Redstone, so we don't wanna replicate capability because resources are so constrained. It probably wouldn't make sense to stand up a standalone organization. Sir?
Do you have a strategy or a plan for incorporating AI?
Ooh, of course we do.
What is it?
Yeah, so AI is a big hot button, right? So I want to go back to something I said about modeling and sim from an AI perspective. I grew up in S3I, and AI was a very big initiative in S3I about how to use it, especially, and although the S3I and test, we get reams of data. So how can we use AI to help us get through that reams of data quicker and give us the salient points we need as leaders to make decisions about, confident decisions about where that recommendation should go based on that data? I'm not sure we're there yet. I'm a very skeptical leader because sometimes I can be a little risk adverse, but I do run by the seat of my pants. So that's an example of an area we're trying to evolve AI from the standpoint of how do we leverage it to help us get through the reams of data that we have to get through to get to this point. The second area that we're looking at AI is how do we make some of our systems more AI enabled, because our limited resources from a soldier perspective is difficult when you have all of these commodities in the field. So what can we do through AI and automation to take the burden off the soldier? Some of the things that we have talked about is, from a preventive maintenance perspective, I know the aviation community has like health and monitoring systems on there that things a little bell, kind of like your car, flashes up a thing when you need to change your oil or something like that. I don't think we have all of that figured out yet, but it is something we're looking at. It's just gonna take us a little time, Miranda's opinion again, to build a confidence in AI, especially for something that could kill somebody, to make sure leaders and users understand the risk they may be accepting. And again, that's all Miranda's opinion.
Thank you.
Hold on, Mr. Fitzgerald. He beat you hand-wise.
Thank you. Question around contracting. Obviously, in order to get to commercial contracts, to get to other contracts, and the speed of contracting, I assume you're gonna open avenue to any of the contracting vehicles that are out there, Oasis, Oasis Plus, anything that's in the market, and not just Express per se.
100%. I mean, we're trying to look across the board before putting a brand new contract in place. Just so that we can leverage something that already exists, especially if we wanna move fast. So that may be the interim step from a contracting perspective, but then we may find out we need our own for longer term because we have some unique requirements that may not exist or whatever. But from a CETA support perspective, from even a product procurement, we look across the services right now. I mean, because we procure some of our stuff and some of our services through other DoD entities, just because they already have a way for us to get to that.
Follow-up question on that. When you do that acquisition like that, are you gonna speed the timeline of the acquisition? I know that the Secretary of War said we're not doing 24-month acquisition. If we can't do it the time thing, we're gonna find another way to do it.
Yeah, and that's where we're trying to improve the processes and powering down some of those decisions that have to be made. I will tell you, I know alpha contract is not the vogue term these days, but I'm not a big proponent of pitching crap over the fence. Oh, it's in their lane. Then you pitch it back and we have all these questions. So one thing that I push our PMs to do is we're going through contract negotiations, et cetera, is get across the freaking table from each other and nail this down, hash it out. That's what takes time, right? When I can kick this Coke bottle over to somebody else and I can move on to my next task, and then they kick it back to me, I'm not doing anything to improve the process, right? So we've got to be better teammates from the standpoint of having those hard conversations. But as companies, you have to send those empowered people to those meetings, because if they gotta go back up and ask another may I, we're still not doing the right thing, right? So I need industry to come to the table with ideas on how we can speed that up as well. But I implore you, if we wanna have a face-to-face meeting and we wanna like hash it out and get it done and let's get an agreement and let's shake our hands and then we'll clean up the paperwork on the backside, I'm all about it, because that's the only way we're gonna go faster. So.
Okay, what we're seeing here, I think, is the articulation of urgency and speed. This is about implementing urgency and speed. What I'm seeing here, and I've read and many times Secretary Hexeth's directive, and what I'm seeing here is the Army's implementation of that directive, and I'm not necessarily seeing the clarity of that directive necessarily, because I'm seeing oversight, support, so on. I'm not seeing decision authorities. Mm-hmm. And I think the strength of that directive is the authority to make quick decisions. Now, the acquisition, in terms of the acquisition oversight, there's a question here somewhere. But in terms of acquisition oversight or contracting oversight, would that not be more appropriate? We'll ultimately come to that, but we're talking about embedding the SCO, but is that enough? And that's the question. The Army is saying that's enough, and the Army is saying that's enough to have a contracting official in the PAE. The Army is saying it's okay to have the test official in the PAE and so on. And of course, requirements. That is a T2COM activity. But and the lab support is particularly interesting. And in terms of aligning S&T investments, is that the same thing as directing S&T investments? Is acquisition oversight the same as acquisition direction and contracting directive? So I'm concerned that this appears to be a little bit watered down in terms of the word oversight, as opposed to the hard line, by George, the PAE is in charge, and the PAE is going to listen to folks and make a decision, and it's going to do that quickly, and it's going to have the authority to do that. the total and complete authority to do that.
Right.
And rather than all this stuff, you know, this back and forth, and everybody can say no. The PAE, you are going to have that authority. I hope the Army will come, maybe they will eventually strengthen those authorities such that takes place. Would you comment on that, please?
Absolutely, and I would say that's where it goes back to that mind shift set, right? Because that's a mindset change as opposed to a process change. And it's really, I think we're gonna have to step in it a couple of times, or we're gonna have some successes a couple of times to prove what can be powered down. I will tell you, General Lozano has a lot of authority, and authority is a weird word, so I hate using it, because authority means something different to everybody, right? But having those people within our formation, going back to the gentleman's point on urgency and efficiency, we have a more direct line than we've ever had before. Even though we had great relationships, General Lozano now can prioritize from a test perspective. He can now prioritize from a requirements perspective. He can now prioritize from an S&T perspective. We didn't do that before. We had to go ask Mother May, hey, we need to go prioritize this test over this test. Okay, well, let's go work it up through 14 people to make sure we can make that work. Now with our direct test community, that's, okay, that test is number one, that test is number two, let's make sure we have those resources laid in to do that and stuff. So that's where I think right now that's still the unknown of what everybody's gonna feel comfortable powering completely down, as opposed to having their hands in just a little bit. So that's where the norm is gonna come in, and I don't think we're gonna be at a normal for another year and a half, 2 years potentially. And we may not even be in a norm then, because this is all about continuous improvement, and we're gonna learn things through this whole process. So I know I stumbled over that a little bit, but, we're still in a state of unknown, unfortunately. We're doing the best we can to implement as much as we can. PAE Fires is a trailblazer. We're running fast, doing everything we can do from the standpoint of taking advantage of things we think we can take advantage of while treading lightly to make sure we don't do something we shouldn't. Sorry, I think you had a question. I apologize. I keep.
No, I was just saying, perfect contract is a mile away whenever that happens, but,
Say that one more time?
a perfect contract is a mile away, so if you
Mile
don't
away,
have to
okay.
like polish the cannonball to get across the finish line. But
Mhm.
my question is more of the acquisition oversight. I know a few years back, they had the adaptive acquisition framework, and, where they kind of empowered, the decision-making down to the lowest accountable person. Usually it was at the PM level, 05, 06, GS 15 level. But it sounds like is it going back up with the PAE? Because, they created those pathways like the multi-tier authority, Section 804 and things like that. And at that point, folks at the ASALT or even OSD, when you went up there for the milestone reviews, they would, power those down back to the back then PEOs and PMs. Is that still the case?
That is still the case. So there will be some of the programs powered down. There will be some programs that are not because they have special interest or whatever, but I anticipate the majority of the programs will be powered down either to the capability portfolio executive or to the PAE, depending on the ACAT level. Because there's certain things based on ACAT that we still got to ensure that we're doing right from a financial performance and risk perspective, but there could be potential programs, because General Lozano has acquisition authority over several programs right now, or he did previously in the PEO, and I anticipate that will stay and even flow down possibly further to the CPEs that are underneath the PA.
Thank you.
Sir, go ahead.
Could you expand a little bit on PA Fire's role in cross-domain or cross-warfighting function portfolio requirements? So an example would be how would PAE Fires and PAE C3N work together on Fire's command and control capabilities with AI and data added to that, or with launch effects with the aviation and maneuver community? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So PAE works a lot across the portfolio from a joint perspective, not just within the Army, but also across the other services. So I'll do the aviation one just because it's very familiar to my heart or whatever. But So from an aviation perspective, Maneuver Air basically has the UAS mission. We have the weapon mission. So we partner with aviation, we develop the weapon, they develop the UAS and the launcher, and then we team together to make the two work together to provide the capability they need from a UAS perspective. So that's example one of how we partner. From a C3N perspective, we're building the IBCS system, which is our C2 for our AMD, Air Missile Defense Architecture. So we have to integrate with all of the other entities that C3N is executing. So we cross-talk to make sure we understand the interfaces that our command and control has to talk to at the higher echelons. So there is a lot of cross-talk across the board. Another example is the CAMEL program I mentioned previously. The Army's developing a common tactical truck out of one of our other CPEs. Our teams are tied together because if there's gonna be a common tactical truck for the Army, we need to ensure we're not developing something totally different because the sustainment bill for managing two trucks would get very large. So there is a lot of joint operational across the PAEs from a, ensuring we're putting the right equities in the field. From a cross-service perspective, we do a lot with our Air Force and our Navy partners because they have munitions that we fire off some of our systems. And again, we don't want to create another munition if we don't have to because the munition already exists, but we need it to be a ground capability as opposed to an air capability. So we have that cross-domain activity we have going on. From a Missile Defense Agency perspective, you know, the Golden Dome as well as, I don't want to go into Golden Dome, so please don't anybody ask me Golden Dome questions. Guam Defense System, I'll talk Guam Defense, we're, you know, partnering with NBA from a Guam Defense perspective. SMDC, we're partnering from a DE perspective. So we do joint operations all the time. We're not about it's invented here or we're not going to use it. We're about what's out there that we can get to the capability to the field quickest. And let's take advantage of what we can, mainly to drive that sustainment bill down. We don't want to have so many systems out there that we're having to maintain. We don't want to make sure that we're putting stuff out there that soldiers can't use. If they're common with something and like what they have, let's take advantage of something they have and let's figure out how to adapt our stuff to it. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Sir, Audrey.
On number 6, when you say align S&T investments and future modernization efforts for fire codes, is the PAE going to have funding that they can go fund your S&T groups to do, or is it just prioritizing what those, I'm assuming this was gonna stay with, you know, admin back the Perkins area, is it just prioritizing what they get funding to go with?
Yeah, it's more, the S&T would stay with them, but General Lozano would work with Dr. Kirsch and T2COM to prioritize what those efforts should be. As opposed to having 25, we may only have 6 because we want to make sure we're putting as much investment in those 6 as we can so that we can move it faster and then get it over the valley of death and then let's go flip the switch and do something else somewhere else.
But that's not the PAE's responsibility to go get that funding to go do this.
They'll still fund for it.
They'll still fund for it.
The labs will still fund for it.
Okay, right, thank you.
Sir?
So in many ways, it seems like what is old is new. This, you know, I remember before there was an ACC, you know, the commands were responsible for doing the contracting, the RDECs were aligned with the commodity commands. Are you seeing this as well?
Can you expand on what you mean by seeing this as well?
So, is Mr. Genta working for you or ACC?
He's dual report. He works with General Lozano as the CPE, or excuse me, as the enabler contracting, but he also still works through the ACC chain up through AFC for things that he needs to go through that chain for.
Okay.
Is that always the way it's gonna be? I don't know, because General Lozano technically has the dual reporting as well. He reports to Mr. Abraham as the AE on the acquisition side, and General Hodney on the T2COM side for requirements. Be the dotted line to AFC. So it's really more about synergizing and making sure we're staying more tightly coupled with our partners as opposed to trying to get a layer out because those are independents that we still have to ensure that we're meeting integrity. Sir?
So,
who no-kidding around owns requirements? Now, obviously, the user has to define the requirement, and then acquisition community executes that requirement, and it does seem like that there's trying to be this merging or streamlining, and that there may be more authority or flexibility in trying to do those trades like you were talking about. But obviously, all those in the way it's been historically is because there does need those checks and balances in terms of, you know, a PM not just doing whatever so that they can, you know, execute and you get it, right? But so, you know, so from your perspective, from a, what does it say on paper, but then how do you see it in how it's gonna kind of come out in real life is like, who's no care around on the requirements?
General Hodney will always own the requirements from a DOC perspective, and General Costello, being the deputy PAE, he will be our conduit for that. I will tell you from my perspective, since November, when the PAEs rolled out, General Costello has been in almost every meeting that we've had, whether he has equity in it or not. And what the requirements community brings to the table in those meetings is something we were missing in the past. Before, we were a little bit more stovepiped because people had their own focus areas and that took up their day job. But I have seen so much better collaboration and coordination from a driver perspective. Now, are we perfect yet? Absolutely not. Will we ever be perfect? No. But T2Com will always own the requirements. But General Lozano will have the capability to influence trade-offs in those requirements if he needs to in coordination with General Costello.
And do you see that then would actually speed up? Because obviously the two different problems that typically historically had, first the requirements creep, that people keep piling things on, which drags things out and raise costs and schedule. Then the other piece is that you get locked in and you can't actually iterate on a requirement, update something because the threat's moving so fast. So how do you see this new construct addressing both those problems?
Yeah, so one of the things we've been talking a lot about is that before, we would basically tell you to build a car, build it to go 90 miles an hour, build it to go fly, build it to be black, build it to have leather seats or whatever. We want to get away from being so prescriptive to industry that you can bring your innovation to bear. And I think that's key because we only know what we know. And so one of the things we've been talking a lot about, especially from an industry perspective, and it's where it's hard for industry in my opinion, is they want to be told that sometimes because that's where the mindset is. It's okay if you come back and say, well, we don't want to make it go 90 miles an hour. We don't want to paint it black. We don't want to make it fly. We don't want to make this. Here is an option for you to consider. And that's where General Lozano and General Costello will have the question about, oh, dang, that makes a lot of sense. We shouldn't have to tell them to go make it 90 miles an hour black and fly. So we're really going to be relying on the industry to propose solutions to us. Now we'll give you a framework, but it's not going to be a detailed framework, if that makes any sense. So I just ask for your patience because you're not going to have the recipe. We want y'all to help us create the recipe so that we can make sure we're taking advantage of the capabilities that we don't know about that are out there. Go ahead, your questions. Sorry.
This is Dr. Razik Yaqub from Alabama A&M University. I'm also a director of AI and Cybersecurity RISE Foundation. The question I have is that you mentioned that AI would expedite to make trade-off across cost, schedule, and performance to deliver capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
When we engage technology, it opens a lot of doors to cybersecurity as well. So my question is that what kind of clauses are often missing in the context about cybersecurity? And of course, not in context only, but in RFIs as well.
Yeah, a very valid point, right? Because we talk about cybersecurity a lot and what risks center around cybersecurity. So we're trying to work more diligently with our CIO G6 and with our upper echelons that understand the clauses we should be putting in our contracts. Because we have not been as robust in the past of ensuring that we're putting the right language in there. And that's a risk area sometimes that you make a trade-off of with respect to cyber from the standpoint, like, okay, well, I know I have this vulnerability. What's my risk associated with that vulnerability, and when am I gonna fix that vulnerability? So those are some of those trade-offs that'll have to be discussed, and the risk associated with that could be too great, and you're not gonna trade that off until you go patch that cybersecurity risk, et cetera. So we're getting better at that. We're making sure we're doing the SCAVs, the SCAVs, all of those scans, making sure we have the independent teams going out, red team, blue team, and everything to ensure that we understand any cyber vulnerabilities we may have. Again, cyber's hard. It's never gonna be perfect. There's always gonna be an anomaly that comes up. We're just gonna have to figure out how we work through that and what the risk is associated. Sir?
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about the PIT, Pathway for Innovation Technology, and how you guys will interface with that, and also, kind of how they will work with admin and testing?
Yeah, so if we go to the next slide. So I'll use this to go to the next slide, just to, y'all can still ask questions on that other one, but I just really wanted to show kind of how the new PAE construct is kind of laid out overall. And then I'll talk a little bit about the PIT as well. So as you see, the third block over from my left, you see the PAE fires. And what PAE fires is made up of currently is we gained the howitzer group from GCS, PEO GCS. We gained all PEO missiles and space equities, and I'll show you a picture chart in a few moments. This will make a lot more sense. We gained some of the munition stuff coming out of Picatinny that really centers around that howitzer mission. And then we gained all of the RIGTO activities that used to be under General Rash. So that is what currently makes up PAE fires. You see all the other entities here, you can follow the lines because everything, there's a lot of stuff moved together. The one thing I want to hit on a RIGTO perspective, in RIGTO previously, we had a group called HMIF, which was your Human Machine Interface. That group is no longer within PEO Missiles and Space or PAE Fires. That group moved to PEO Aviation / PAE Maneuver. So that group is the only entity PEO Missiles and Space lost in this merger of all of these other entities. Everything else stayed within the portfolio. Ours was a lot cleaner from a break perspective and a merger perspective than some of the others because of locations and things like that. But just wanted to hit this chart just so y'all can kind of see what came into our portfolio from a PIT perspective. So we're working very, very closely with the PIT because I'll go back to the S&T, they're the early trailblazers on some of the capabilities where they're offering these prize challenges and things like that. So that's another area from an early entrant, early capability already exists that they're evaluating, that they inform us on to say, hey, you may want to look at this capability for this application. And that's where the requirements community comes into play, because there may be a capability of the paper out there that we didn't know about that can fulfill a requirement that they've identified as part of a prize challenge. They can come in and say, hey, this is probably a TRL level 5, but this is what it would take to mature even further to get it to the 6, 7, 8, whatever you want it to be at to go after that capability or that threat you want it to go out of. So we're very, very tightly coupled with the PIT activity so that we know what the prize challenges are focused on. And if we have capabilities we're looking at, we flow them to the PIT, and the PIT will go off and execute or identify challenges or fast opportunities to evaluate capabilities associated with what we need. GIAD 401 is another one of those entities from a PIT perspective, so very tied in from a GIAD 401 on the counter UAS side, because we've been the Office of Primary Responsibility for counter UAS for several years for the Army. But GIAD 401 is doing something very similar from a counter UAS perspective. They're going out and evaluating capabilities and then informing us of what capabilities are out there that we may want to flow into our common capability set that we're fielding to the soldiers. So it's really, again, tightly coupled from the standpoint of communications. We have people on their teams. It's not just like they go do it, pass this information, we evaluate. We have people on their teams and stuff as well that are doing that. So the PIT's still forming a little bit as well. We're actually having a meeting with them the 1st of February to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music, understanding the process and stuff. But that's another one of those forming areas we're going to have to continue to work through.
Will they have acquisition authority?
So they will have some acquisition authority. I don't know what it is. I haven't been involved in the PIT very much, but I expect they'll have some limited acquisition authority through these prize challenges and stuff, if what makes sense. But I don't know what those are at the present time, so. Sorry.
The S&T bullet number 6 referenced Army or large national battle priorities.
same? Is there gonna be a relook at what the on priorities are?
So let's go to the next one.
Yeah.
You wanna go back or go to the next one?
This one.
Yeah.
This, so this allows me to answer your question in some way, shape, or form. So this is the PAE structure as it stands today. So as you see, we have the PAE fires, which everybody knows, General Lozano. Deputy PAE, General Pat Costello, who sits out at Fort Sill. I'm the other yellow box up there. Then we're gonna have 2 CPEs. So our 2 CPEs are gonna be offensive and defensive fires. So Colonel Valley Everton is going to be the defensive fire CPE, and General RJ Mikesh is gonna be the offensive CPE. People wonder why we split it, but the PEO missiles in space commodity was so large, putting everything under one CPE was just almost impossible. So we consciously made a decision to split it across, and that's why you have the Integrated Fires Directorate, because as we have to merge those capabilities into a systems of systems approach, we got to have somebody that independent merger, so that those 2 CPEs play nicely together. So I get to boss Colonel Yelverton and General Mikesh around, which makes me happy. But under defensive fires, we didn't have a lot of changes from an organizational perspective, because that's where most of our air and missile defense portfolio continues to lie. Probably the area, and why I want to put this chart up here, is you'll see on the offensive side, we had a lot of changes with respect to the entities that came into our portfolio. So Storm, TAGM, Strike, they all still reside there from a capability. And again, for those not familiar with our portfolio, you'll see a picture chart in a moment. PM Howitzer came into play, so their S&T activities will come into play as well. So we will make sure we understand where we need to be going from an S&T perspective for them. But more importantly, under that advanced fires prototype area, there's a lot of new capabilities in low-cost containerized munitions from an S&T perspective. There's a lot of hypersonics capability that's coming to bear. Camel falls within that area. So from an offensive perspective, that's where that lies. The big difference on the defensive side is you see the DE and counter UAS, so that's where those S&T entities would lie, would be under that CPE. So our CPE portfolio grew, but also our S&T breadth grew to include the howitzer, to include DE, and to include any other oddball things that OSW continues to kick down the court to us that we'll work and figure out how to execute. But AMD, long-range precision fires, still primary focus areas, because all of those entities fit within those umbrellas. So while I'm on this slide, I'll just highlight really quick the enablers. I talked around these a little bit. You will see we have a test enabler, the fire seated contracting programming system center, the ICO, that's our international opportunity. We have a lot of international partners, and then sustainment. And those are the ones that's going to be very more closely linked with us across the board in execution of our mission. Also, a big belly button you see up here underneath is digital transformation. That is a focus area for us, and I know it's a big focus area for the AAE of getting off of paper and let's get digital, and making sure we're taking advantage of these digital tools that exist. And our chief information officer, as well as our digital transformation lead, are working through that right now. So that's a big focus area for well. And that goes into the AI, because we want to be able to go peruse that database to, if I've told somebody something, I want to go tell them the same thing the 4 more times they ask me, as opposed to telling them something different, right? So that's kind of the top level structure. This is subject to change, right? Because again, we're not norms yet, but this is our best guess as what we're going to look like as a PAE today. So if I see you 6 months from now and it's changed, it's because we've learned a lot of things along the road, because we still have a lot of learning opportunities to go. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide, and then I'll go back to questions if that's okay. So I really just want to put this chart up here to show you the breadth of PAE fires. We were big at PO missiles in space, but right now we have 62 programs of record. Now I have, General Lozano has 10 project offices. You can see the budget. It's increasing every single day, and I'm limited on resources with the hiring reductions that we took across the board. So I know we have industry, I know we have academia, I know that we have a lot of other players across the board, and that's where your partnership is gonna be incredibly important to us to make sure we can execute this large portfolio that we have to execute. This is not for the faint at heart, honestly. It's fabulous, I enjoy it every single day, but I'm gonna tell you, it can be stressful, because there's a lot of needs from across this commodity base, and by golly, General Lozano is not gonna let us fail. And that's where I implore you to help us make sure that we don't fail with this mission set, because it takes all of us to do this, because we're not doing it by ourselves. All right, next slide. So picture slide, this is my favorite slide, this is General Lozano's favorite slide, because this actually gives you an idea of our commodity base from a picture perspective. I'm not gonna go into each of these in a lot of detail, but this just shows you kind of all of the entities that is within our formation. So you see a lot of ground launchers, you see a lot of command and control, you see a lot of sensors, you see munitions, etc. That's our sweet spot from a PAE fires perspective. But that doesn't mean we don't partner with other entities from a joint perspective to take advantage of commodities they bring to bear. But at the end of the day, PAE fires is responsible for delivering, maintaining, sustaining, building, all of this stuff to support our warfighter. And it's a lot. It is a lot. And we're gonna do it to the best of our ability, and we're gonna make sure the soldiers have what he or she needs to execute their mission set. Probably the newest things that I'll point out for some of our industry partners that they may have not seen, if you look down at the very bottom, my right, you will see the SPHS, the red emblem. That's our howitzer family that came into our formation. So not only do we have their legacy systems, but we also have the mobile tactical cannon, which is a new system that is just kicking off. I know they got the industry day, like I said, I think it's next week. I should know, but I can't remember. But there's an RFI out associated with that, so please, if you're interested in that, please reach out, look at it, participate, etc. And then you'll see the AFPO right to the left of that. That's where we have our Blackbeard ground launch platform and our Camel system. That's where I expect some of our newer RICTO-like-ish entities to come into play, just because we need to vet some things a little bit more so than others before it goes into one of these programs of record, etc. But I do anticipate that program office is going to continue to grow. And then if you look just to the left of that, you will see the directed energy rolled into the defensive fires. So I think there's a RFI going out on the street for eHealth, which is the enhanced high energy laser capability in the near future as well. So that's an area that we're continuing to focus on as the Army defines that directed energy strategy that they want to employ across the Army. With Colonel Yelverton, some of y'all know he was also serving as our DASM and serving as the Counter UAS lead. Counter UAS is now moved under directed energy under Colonel Shannon Thompson, because there's a lot of synergy there across the Counter UAS community on how you employ DE and how you employ the other Counter UAS capabilities within the PAE fires portfolio. So that's just another shift that we made. Outside of that, we've pretty much stayed status quo from a program office perspective. Got tremendous 06s. Thank God we got rid of Jason Tate. Got a spare 06 in there. You know I'm kidding, Jason. Colonel Tate was fabulous when he was a stair PM and stuff, and so I'm very, very fortunate to have the 06s in our formation when I first came in. I'll brag on my 06s. When I first came into PEO Missiles in Space, I was like, God, these guys don't eat me alive. They are incredible, incredible, incredible individuals, and I will tell you, they're dedicated to the mission. And it just makes me so happy to see how dedicated they are, not only to their mission, golly, they take care of their teams. And I think that's what makes PAE Fires so great, is how well they took care of their teams, especially trying to execute all of that stuff with limited resources. So just have to brag on PAE Fires because they are incredible. And that includes all of y'all. So not just our government team, but our industry partners as well. All right, I've said a lot. Just wanted to get through the slides real quick so I can level set on everybody on that. So I will open the floor back up for questions. Hold on, Monty, go ahead.
It has to do with the howitzer program, and of course that's been operated, and the S&T for that has been under a different center, and the contracting has been under a different center of those. And yet we have a SCO, or a senior contracting official, from ACCR basically, or whatever. And likewise, we have Dr. Kirsch. Is that program transferred in total to AVMEC, for example? I suspect it is not. What about the contracting aspect? Is that all those contracts and all those legacy contracts? Are those being transferred, you might say, to ACCR?
So those are to be determined. So right now, what happens from an admin perspective is if Dr. Kirsch needs engineering support to support the howitzer team, he reaches out to his counterpart up at the DevCon Center associated with that. From a contracting perspective, we're not going to break any current contracts because we cannot let mission fail. But as we progress through the end of those contracts, we'll evaluate whether Mr. Gento wants to take those over or if he'll continue to collaborate with his Detroit partners in execution of that mission set. So that's a TBD, but it's something we discuss all the time.
Thank you.
Audrey, go ahead.
Yeah, do you envision at any point in time that THAAD gets pulled into this PAE, or are you just gonna, let's say MDA, don't want to coordinate more with that? Because I know THAAD is actually Army, but MDA still holds that responsibility.
Yeah, so right now there's some initial planning going on to pull that into PAE fires. That would include the THAAD as well as the TP2 radar. But nothing is set in stone formally, but we're working some initial transition plans if it happens. So we're postured to make sure we don't break the THAAD mission because it's critical to that architecture and defense capability, especially when you start talking GES.
Right, thanks.
Sir? All right, sir?
One more quick one. How late in the requirements process would you accept change?
How late in the requirements process would we accept change? I would say we're always accepting change from a requirements perspective because we're all about continuous improvement. You're gonna have to always have a base that you're delivering against, but that doesn't mean that's your final. So requirements continue to evolve just like the product continues to evolve based on the threat that you're trying to counter. That would be Miranda's opinion, but it makes logical sense to me that we would never be so codified in our requirement that we couldn't update that capability for the latest and greatest technology that may be out there. That's why I want to hit on modularity. The government is going to be very, very insistent about owning interfaces so that I can take box X off because box X has capability to do Y, and then I go put box Z on because now box Z has capability against that threat that it didn't have before. So modularity and interface control from a government perspective is going to become very, very important, and you're going to see that as part of a lot of these RFIs and Industry Day. It'll be discussed heavily. All right, my crowd's getting thick.
Any other questions, gentlemen or ladies? Thank you so very much.